In this video, I'm going to walk you through building your material budget in LMN. If you've walked through some of the other videos like field labor or equipment, you're going to love this one because it's a heck of a lot simpler. So let's dive right in. Here on my budget screen, to get to the materials budget, I'm just going to go down the left-hand side and click materials. At the top of the materials budget, you've got something called a material tax. Now this tax, you probably won't need to enter anything for there. The only time you'd put a tax percentage in there is if A, you pay tax to the government when you buy materials, so you pay your vendors a sales tax. But two, really importantly, that your tax costs are not already included in your accounting totals for materials. Now, generally, when you run your materials expenses out of your accounting, any taxes paid on those materials are included. But again, we don't know how you set up your accounting. So generally, this is zero because most companies have the cost of taxes, if they pay them, included in the material cost. But if you pay tax and your vendor tax costs are not included in your material expense total, then you'd want to put in your average material sales tax up there so that it'll build that sales tax on top of your forecast. But again, most companies are zero. So once you're past the tax, we'll jump right into the line items here. You can keep your materials budget super simple if you want. All you really need is one line item that says materials. Your previous will be what you spent last year. Your forecast are going to be what you think you're going to spend this year. And that's not that complicated to figure out. If you're going to grow in sales, your materials are probably going to grow as well. In fact, you might argue they're going to have to grow. There's no way you're going to do more in sales and not buy any more materials unless you're just raising your prices. I guess that would be one way to do it. But yeah, if you're going to grow 10% in sales, you're probably going to spend 10% more on materials. It's a pretty easy calculation. So however much your sales have grown, you're going to want to increase your materials forecast as well. As long as you do that, your material budget's going to be more or less right. We're never going to know exactly what you're going to spend on materials. You're just simply going to forecast based on a pretty good estimate. Now here, I've chosen to break down. Here in my budget, I've chosen to break down my materials spending by division. So I've got installation materials, maintenance materials, snow and ice materials, and some disposal. If you're a larger company and you want to get a little more accurate with your forecast, go ahead and do this. But again, if you keep your materials as simple as just one line item, you're not really losing out on much. This is just going to help me manage my spending by coming up with targets for each division. But it's not actually going to change any of the overhead recovery numbers or anything as long as my totals are the same. The only really important thing you have to worry about on your materials is that, again, just like our other budgets, only materials that you estimate would go in here. So if you did some work around the shop and you bought materials for that, that should be an overhead. If you're buying oil filters or shop supplies, that goes in overhead. Even some consumable materials, garbage bags, string line, marking paint. Remember, you don't, now some companies might, but generally you don't estimate that kind of stuff. So it should go in overhead. That way those costs are recovered as part of your markups. The materials here would be your estimated materials, things that you estimate. So here's some quick tips and tricks on getting your material budget right. Number one, keep it simple. Have 25 material forecasts for every type of material. We don't know exactly how many cedar fences we're going to sell at the beginning of the year, so it's hard to even guesstimate. Let's just forecast it in grouped totals. We'll keep it simple. Again, that 1 to 5 rule, 1 to 5 line items in your material budget, that's about the right amount. Number two, only include estimated materials. Remember, things like shop supplies, consumables, or any other non-estimated materials, they need to go in your overhead budget. So you probably need a total in your overhead budget for those. We'll get to overhead later. And finally, forecast change. If your sales grow or shrink, materials will likely grow or shrink by the same percentage. You follow those rules of thumb, and you should have a great material budget. And we'll see you in the subcontracting budget next.